Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. First of all, tell somebody you know that we're going live right now, live to YouTube, two channels, the Black Press USA channel and the Inside News MN channel. We hope you're connecting with us there. We're also live to Facebook, three different platforms. We're live to LinkedIn and live to Twitter as well. And, we're at the moment of decision. This is a historic moment that we are in and that we are moving towards. This is a decision facing us to decide the fate, the future of the nation, of democracy, of our people. And we're pleased to focus on that today. I'm so happy to have Representative Ilhan Omar, who is a glass ceiling breaker in her own right in all kinds of ways, to be here to talk about the work she's done in her own campaign for reelection, but also as an important team member supporting the Harris and Walz candidacy for the top office. Joining me today, hanging out with me today, two formidable writers. Haley Taylor Schlitz is a reporter, she's a columnist for Inside News, but her daytime job is as an assistant attorney general with Keith Ellison's office, and she's been on before as a surrogate for the Harris campaign. Coach Leah Jean Dingley is former Minnesota sports superstar. She is the sports editor for Inside News, but she's also involved in all things political. She's here joining us also with other Shamika Bogan, who is one of the, I think, operators in community, encouraging people to get involved. She ran the Souls to the Polls initiative, but runs so much more. Let's jump right in. Representative Ilhan Omar, thank you for being here. What a busy day. Give me your assessment of where we are right now, and thank you so much for all you have done and all you continue to do on behalf of democracy and behalf of our people here in Minnesota.
Yeah, thank you so much, Al, for being with you. You know, we are election is tomorrow. We are out and about reminding everyone and anyone that we find to go and vote. The DFL has a bus traveling across the state, getting out the vote. We are also helping with phone banking for some districts outside of the state that have potential of flipping. So it's all hands on deck.
How's it look to you right now, just your gut, in terms of what's going to happen tomorrow in the presidential election? What's your feeling? What's your hope and what's your feeling?
I am hopeful. I'm optimistic. Polls obviously are a snapshot of a moment, and we are seeing Harris rise through the polls as she closes her final argument on why she should be the president of this incredible country. And we are seeing a lot of momentum. We're also anecdotally hearing from a lot of folks that we are expanding our coalition and inviting a lot of people. We're even seeing places like Iowa be back in play. And so it is an optimistic time to be out there campaigning.
What's the danger? I fear, Ilhan, in my view, sort of rancorous and venomous activity from the MAGA crowd. How do ordinary people ingest and resist all of that and find themselves motivated to do the right thing in terms of casting their vote, not being dissuaded, discouraged, but encouraging families, friends, neighbors to get out and vote, show up, stand up? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we know that this election really is a future saving election. We know that our democracy in itself and the future of our republic are literally on the ballot. So it is time for people to, ignore the rhetoric that is out there that's scaring people about there being a danger in going to the polls, and to actually show up. There is a lot of safeguards that are in place for people to safely vote. And so we need everyone to understand that it is important for them to exercise their right to vote and go to the polling places.
How excited are you to be in this moment and to be part of it? How do you position when you look at Ilhan Omar? And I'm asking you to look at Ilhan Omar, say 20 years from now, looking back at today, how will you be describing this moment?
I mean, this is, I think, for all of us as Americans, like I said earlier, feels as if we are working towards something bigger than ourselves. It is not just an election cycle where we are debating policies that will craft the kind of future that we want, but it is about giving ourselves the ability to even have that political debate to craft those policies. And I think many of us look at another Trump presidency as being detrimental to the survival of our democracy and our republic as we know it. And so when I think of myself, as someone who came here as a child with a father and a grandfather that really loved the idea of participating in our democracy, to be fighting for it as an elected official with a history-making candidate really feels incredible. And I know that when the books are written, we're all going to be really proud of everything that we have done to bring us to this moment.
The question of women's rights is on the ballot as well, women's bodies, women's health. Let me bring in Haley Taylor Schlitz and Coach Leah Jane. As I indicated, introduced them to celebrated, fierce women and ask them to join this conversation with you about how we can protect and preserve and grow the rights of women in our democracy. Bring them in, first of all, and what are your thoughts? What's the question about gender that we have to be really concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, we have, someone who celebrated the idea and takes pride in the fact that Roe was overturned under his watch. We know that Project 2025 has a lot more plans to gut our liberties as women in this country. We also have a vice presidential candidate, that talks about, does it even make any sense for certain women to be able to vote, right? Like childless cat ladies and limiting even the access to the ballot box. And so a lot of women are really up in arms and might actually be the reason that not only do we win, but we win with margins that we haven't seen before, because it is not about just me, myself, and what I want preserved for myself, but it's about my daughters, it's about my nieces, it's about my sisters. And so there's a lot more at stake. And we also know that there are a lot of men, that feel that way. And I have two young men in my household that are voting for the first time. And I know that they are voting with that in mind as well.
Haley, Coach Leah, question, comment?
Yeah, I want to echo what Representative is saying about kind of just really being united. A lot of what we're seeing from the other side, from the rhetoric, is very divisive. We hear comments about Puerto Rico being an island of garbage. We hear former President Trump just really saying very hateful and disparaging language about Vice President Harris. It's very, very divisive. And as a member of Gen Z, the most diverse generation this country has seen, and the first minority generation that this country has seen as well, it's very alarming. Just the essence of their message is division, and the essence of their message is about tearing down and hating other groups instead of policies that unite them or that they care about. And that's the difference truly between what they stand for and what we stand for. What we stand for represents values that align with our morals and our groups and our country and our diversity. And what they stand for is really just attacking others. It's not uniting them. It's really just what they have in common is hating other people instead of things that best suit or serve them as a group. And like I said, as a member of Gen Z, we are very well aware of that. We grew up with losing for half the country losing the right reproductive rights as women.
Hey, Haley, put a question in there for me. I love that, but give me a question.
But yeah, I mean, I guess where I was going really with it is for as a member of Gen Z, I'm very excited to see how at every generation we're turning out to vote more because we grew up with these issues is experiencing them firsthand. So that's what I'm excited to see, really.
Ilhan, you're between me and Gen Z. So you're the direct link. So talk about that. Now, how have you been successful in really connecting with and embodying and nurturing that knowledge and that passion in Gen Z?
Yeah, I mean, I think the young people of today are a little different than millennials in that, I think their involvement, and Haley's right, their involvement and anticipation of the creation of good policy that sets them up for generations, I think is inspiring. And so when we're kicking off rallies, we're seeing so many of them, that are coming out to door knock. I was always a door knocker, but my generation was, sort of being needed to be pulled to get involved. Millennials, I think, mostly have been active in the last few election cycles, but we are seeing Gen Z really show up. They're turning 18. They are there. I actually was with two young people that I visited at a high school last year, and they came to pick up 2 shifts because they truly do understand what is at stake for them.
Coach Leah, jump in here.
Yeah. If I can jump in, absolutely. I'm so glad you brought up Gen Z, but I will tell you that I'm a baby boomer. I know I don't look like it. However, so the tactics that you're seeing mostly are geared toward boomers, correct? Right? So now the problem with that is they're the least mobile. They're the slowest to mobilize. And so even though the message might be going to a vast population of people, it's one that I don't think has been well thought out for the reasons that you're talking about. And my question is, how, as you guys are planning these, and I don't even want to say how you react to what's going on, but how are you guys knowing the playbook that they have and preparing to be multi-generational, because we have to. Now, they're also saying that my generation is the largest that are going to the polls, however, which I think this election is going to show something a little different, but historically it's been that, right? So how are we showing up multi-generationally, intentionally that way?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, and we saw that in 2020. A fast movement of young people who just turned 18 coming out to participate. I think it is, Ayanna Pressley always says policy is her love language. It's about figuring out how in your policy package do you speak to everyone, right? When we talk about student debt cancellation, when we talk about college being free and accessible to people, when we're talking about building generational wealth, when we are talking about addressing the climate crisis and preserving our planet, those are messages that are multi-generational. And so I think the Democrats have figured out how to put a platform together that captures everyone. When he talks about tariffs, that's not speaking to young people, because young people want technology, young people want access to different things that are being imported, and they don't want to pay the high amount of cost that will be associated. So they understand actually that, you know, if we were to put tariffs on goods that are coming from China, that's going to hurt their pocketbooks, and it's going to be really important that they vote for Harris and Walz because they are putting together this opportunity economy. You know, I can't imagine how excited I would have been, you know, when I was having my children, if someone told me that I was going to have childcare capped at 7% of my income. You know, in most of the years when my kids were little, I was paying 30 to 40% of my income just for childcare. If someone told me, you know, that there would be entrepreneurial opportunity and $50,000 in tax credits to start a small business, or, you know, I'm still a renter because I don't come from parents who would have helped me out in buying a home. And so if I had the kind of promise that is in that opportunity economy that Harris talks about, you know, I would have been mobilized to go and vote. So the fact that there is love for everyone in her policy proposals, I think is why we are going to see a multi-generational coalition that are going to come out and vote. For the first time too, I think we're seeing women over 65, right, as that Iowa poll showed, mobilizing in a large way to vote for a Democrat. That's not, I don't think that has been historically that way. And so what Harris is bringing to the table, I think we're seeing, and that closing argument, I was there, I went to Washington, D.C., even if you were going to find something not to like about her, she made it very hard for you to be activated against her, right? This was a very, you know, a speech that truly spoke to every American. This was a speech that was about love for country, love for neighbor. It almost felt like a religious sermon. And I think, you know, everybody felt moved by it. And that's why we started to see a real shift. And we are probably going to be in for a really amazing surprise next week.
Haley mentioned the divisiveness around immigration. I'm a first generation. My father is Cuban born, immigrated here from Jamaica. I'm connected to the experience of new Americans by that lineage. How are you able to see a way forward for sane, sensible policy about immigration in the country? Last question I'll ask now too, because I know you got to go, is talk about how we're going to navigate the question of peace in the Middle East, the end to the devastation in Gaza and of Palestinians, and safety for everybody in the region as well.
I mean, unless you are indigenous or you came on you know, your family came on a slave ship, we are a nation of immigrants, and everybody connects to this demonization of immigrants in their own way, and we are seeing people really get tired of this rhetoric. People do understand that the Biden-Harris administration did try to put forward a bipartisan policy to address the immigration crisis in this country, and we know that Trump said not to pass it because he wanted to have that as a political talking point, something to attack Harris on. And so I do believe once he is removed from the equation, that we will come together and address our broken immigration system. And I will say, you know, to Netanyahu's genocidal war in Gaza, you know, that is still a place where people are frustrated that not much has been done, but people understand that our ability to organize and to push a Harris administration is very much different than our ability to organize and push a Trump administration. So people are choosing who they want to govern with, instead of having someone who will govern against you. And so I think the choices are being made along those lines. And I do believe a lot of the folks, who have been making their voice heard on this issue, like myself, are ultimately going to vote for Harris and Walz.
Can I
Ilhan,
step
go
in here really quick and ask about how you feel about Barbara Bush's endorsement? Former President Bush, his daughter, is endorsing Harris and Walz.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it speaks to both the strengths of Harris's message and platform. We know that many economists have said that her economic policy is going to be better for the country than Trump's economic policy. So we know that a lot of conservatives are being moved through that policy proposal. But we also know people are sick and tired of the divisiveness of just the disgusting way in which Trump presents himself. You wouldn't want that to be your father. You certainly wouldn't want that to be your grandfather. Why in the world would you want that to be your president, right? It sends a message about our country when we pick a man with his character to represent us on a national stage. And so a lot of people like Barbara Bush or Liz Cheney and others are choosing our country over their political ideology. And that is what you would hope anybody who loves their country to do. And we are seeing that across this country.
Thank you.
Representative, thank you so very much for taking time, and thank you for all your work. Stay as long as you can. I know you had a tight schedule.
I do have to run, yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you later.
Well, thank you all for having me.
Take care. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. We continue with my co-host today, Haley Taylor Schlitz, Esquire, an attorney. She's a member of the staff over at Keith Ellison's office, Minnesota's Attorney General, and Coach Leah Jean Dimley, our sports editor, here talking about the sport of politics. We'll call it that. But listen, let's pivot now and bring two more voices to the conversation. Shamika Bogan is here. Shamika, bring her on board. And also former state senator Jeff Hayden is here, who has a lot to say about what's going on in politics in the country and in the state of Minnesota. And also state representative, my representative, Esther Agbaje is here. Bring them all in. And Jeff, let me start with you, because you're on TV all the time now doing analysis of Minnesota politics and national politics. What are your gut reaction, your gut thoughts right now about where we stand, how it looks here in Minnesota?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's good to see you, Representative. So good to see you, Shamika. Haley, I'm not familiar with you, but if you're working for Keith, you're my person. And my long time friend, my childhood friend, Coach Leah. It's so good to see you. I don't know when you got in the baby boomer thing. I think we're the same age. We might be a little bit out, but at any rate, it is so good to see all of you today. Let me say this, Al. I feel good as a Democrat. I feel good. I felt like as the campaign started to wind down and you wanted to see like the closing arguments, I thought that Vice President Harris and Governor Walz made the argument. They were there. They got to every place they needed to be. They articulated their vision. They were able to even pivot when they heard a couple of weeks ago that there were Black men that were maybe not enthusiastically wanting to vote or were thinking about voting for Trump, and that they needed to have a plan. They talked about and surgically pulled out things inside of their plan that were going to be good for Black people, but especially Black men. She was not afraid to go to podcasts, all the Up in Smoke podcasts, which I'd be even a little worried about sometimes with those brothers, and to barbershops and into other mediums, much like what you are producing here, Al. And so she was able to go there and really show who she was. Vice President Harris grew up in Oakland, California, Berkeley, California, went to church there, and she was there around the same time that when I left and I went to California. My mother still lives there. So her and my mother go to the same church, the Third Baptist Church in San Francisco. Reverend Amos C. Brown is the pastor. I remember, this is a really funny story. I'm sorry, as a recovering politician, I got to tell you one quick anecdote.
Now, take your time. Take your time.
My mother worked for the city and county of San Francisco in the district attorney's office. She was the person that you had to see if you had to get some child support taken away from you. So, you know, she was very, very tough. And I remember her distinctly, 20 years ago or whenever Kamala was the district attorney of San Francisco saying, hey, they just hired a new district attorney and she's one tough sister. And I remember that then. This is way before she actually started to ascend and become the U.S. Senator, Attorney General, et cetera. So I only say that to say that I think that it wasn't a surprise to me that Kamala could come into our communities, that could come in authentically in our communities and have a conversation and talk about who she was and what she wanted to do. We saw what her track record, and she was in the fraternity, a sorority, and she went to Howard, but she also authentically grew up in Black neighborhoods. And so I think that showed up here at the end, and where former President Trump was, saying very divisive things, had his whole group of folks out there demeaning, Puerto Rico as a country, Latinos as a culture, Black people as a culture, running around, kind of what we say, skinning and grinning and buck dancing with his outfit on. And I think at the end, for those who had not made a decision, I think as I talk to people, watch the analysis, read the New York Times, as you say, I'll do all the work I need to do to prepare to do work like this. It appeared that even those that were undecided, or even those that had some real strong feelings about the border or the economy, knew that a person like Donald Trump shouldn't be leading our country.
Let me bring in Representative Esther Agbaje, and I want you and Representative Agbaje to talk about the impact of this whole election cycle on Minnesota government. I think we're at a place we've never been before with the number of Black and other people of color, and also presuming that our team succeeds at the ballot tomorrow and the days beyond when we confirm the election. It's a major change for the state of Minnesota. Representative Agbaje, welcome to the program. You've got a contest. You're on the ballot. How does it feel? How does it look? And what are you working towards in getting your constituents and all of Minnesotans to be present and to move forward? What do you think? Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be on the show. Yeah, you are right. I am on the ballot again for my third term. Mostly, I'm really running because I want to continue the good work I've been able to do, particularly in this last biennium. Done a lot of work supporting our Black families, supporting Black women, particularly when it comes to maternal health care, and then also ensuring that we have that investment that we need in housing across the state. So those are just a couple of the reasons why I am asking for people to vote for me to go back. But on the piece about just like different communities coming together, I'm glad to see that a lot of them are coalescing around Democrats. That to me makes me, I think that we have a lot to offer to the state of Minnesota, as hopefully folks have seen over the past 2 years. And so we are looking forward to going back and building on what we've been able to do, particularly things that had to do with paid family medical leave, universal meals. We've done some work around canceling medical debt. And we're also looking at ways to continue to make housing much more affordable for many more people. So I think those are the types of things we're looking forward to going back to, and hopefully building on that and continuing to make a government that works for more people in Minnesota, particularly those who aren't always included at the table, don't always have that type of funding source or wealth that makes people listen to them. So we want to make sure that the power of the people is showing up at the Capitol every day.
Shamika, would you jump in here and talk about the work that you're doing just to mobilize and get voters to the polls? And then I want to come back to Jeff and Representative Agbaje, because I want us all to talk about what happens in state government when the tickets that we support emerge victorious. I think we're at a place we've never been before. I want to go into that. I think that Representative, you and Senator Hayden are uniquely qualified to talk about a future that is an uncharted territory for Minnesota, and I think for the nation as well. but Shamika, come in. How you doing?
I'm good. Well, thank you so much for having me here. And it's always an honor to be on with everybody. So thank you so much for having me. Really just informing people, that is a big part of it. You know, when you know better, you do better. When you have the information and can make an informed decision on what the best option is for you, that's always important. And so with the work that I've been doing, it's been working, you know, with a number of churches, with a number of community organizations, a number of for-profit, nonprofit businesses, just to get the voting information out there. You know, the option to be able to vote early is amazing. Not all of the states have that option, but to be able to vote early without a particular reason. It doesn't have to be that you're traveling. It doesn't have to be that you're not going to be here. So to be able to do that, to be able to do it in your county, in your city, even, you know, these past 2 Sundays, we had Souls to the Polls. So to be able to vote on Sundays after church as a group with your church, to be able to vote on those weekends, that makes a big difference for people because people are busy, they're working, we're raising kids and families and doing all these different things. And so to really break down all those barriers that may be there for people, that's a part of the work that I've been doing.
So, what's your feeling? What's the energy like on the street at your grassroots mobilizing, organizing? What are
Yeah.
you hearing? What are you feeling among ordinary people in our community?
It feels good. You know, people are excited. I think that when you can look at someone that's elected into an office or will be elected into an office that has shared experiences with you and know that they're going to be advocating for you, that feels really good for people. It's when you know that people have no idea what you've been through, that's where it gets really scary. And so it's been really good this election. People are excited about the Harris Walls ticket. Number one, feeling like Vice President Harris has those shared experiences. That's great. Number two, having Governor Walz on the ticket. He has led Minnesota. A lot of people know him. This isn't their first time, like, oh, I'm just now hearing of him. They're very familiar with who he is. And so that feels good for people that are here that say, oh, I know that they will represent me in the way that I need to be represented.
Well, that leads me to the question I was bringing up for former Senator Hayden and for State Representative Extra-Agbaje, but also to you and Coach Leah and to Haley as well. And here it is. You know, when Joe Biden got elected, when he ran, he called himself, he said he promised to be a transformational president. He said his would be a transformational presidency. What did that mean? What could mean all kinds of things. It has meant all kinds of things, but lo and behold, when his decision was made to not seek reelection and the mantle therefore passed to Vice President Harris, that to me is the most transformative incident that we've had in our lifetime, I believe, for all the reasons that we know. But what's interesting to me is that I don't know if he said it or not, but the fact that Tim Walsh selected as his running mate, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, and now that I call that transformational as well. And I think in many ways we could say that his governorship is transformational. Here are some of the signs of that. During the COVID crisis, he had exceptional administrative powers at the executive level, and his team, his administration included the Lieutenant Governor Flanagan and Keith Ellison and the other constitutional officers. But that put our people in a seat of power that we hadn't seen before. So now, what happens if our governor becomes the vice president? Our lieutenant governor becomes the governor of Minnesota. Transformational. First time Native American, to my knowledge, woman becoming the governor of a state, certainly of Minnesota. And transformational Senate President Bobby Joe Champion becoming lieutenant governor for the state of Minnesota. That, my friends, in my view, is transformational. So I'm thinking the stars have aligned. And that alignment includes what State Representative Esther Agbaji represents, and that is a fearless class of BIPOC electeds in the legislature that have delivered for our communities, Black, Brown, Asian, Latino, at a level never imagined before. And from my point of view, from what I hear, they say they are just beginning. Jeff Hayden, talk about this. How does it look? Am I often expressing my hope?
It's amazing, your vision, Al, and once again, I'm always amazed at your ability to tell a story, and I was mesmerized by it. I will first say, if President Champion is listening, he if Shamika will laugh, and Esther will too, our Representative Bajay, he is focused on getting folks elected right now. He is really, when you talk to him, he if he is dreaming, he ain't telling us. Let's just say that. But with that being said, and that comes from just his, if I may brag on my friend a little bit, his real dedication to community and his real dedication and meticulous effort at seeing things through. In addition to that, we've been in situations before where we thought we had elections won and we didn't win by fractions of just a few hundred votes. And all of a sudden we were, as Bobby would call it, measuring the draperies, and then all of a sudden didn't get the house that you want. But that being said, I think that what you said, if things go the way that we want, and Vice President Harris becomes the presumptive nominee or president-elect, and Governor Walz then is going to be the vice president, at some point Governor Walz will have to resign to be the governor of Minnesota. He can't be the vice president of the United States and the governor at the same time. I think that's obvious, but sometimes people don't get that. At that point, the lieutenant governor, by the Constitution, will ascend and become the governor. And the way the Constitution reads, it says the last presiding officer of the Minnesota State Senate would become the lieutenant governor. We just went through this not too long ago when U.S. Senator Tina Smith was the lieutenant governor. U.S. Senator Al Franken resigned because of some of the ethical issues he had. Governor Dayton then promoted her, if you will, appointed her to the U.S. Senate. She then left the vacancy, and then Congresswoman Fishbach now was the last presiding officer of the Senate, and I was involved in a bunch of negotiations. I was in the Senate that she was supposed to ascend, and she didn't want to because she would have been a Republican in a Democratic administration, and so she fought it. And also, we were a very tight, like we are today, a very tight majority, and that would have potentially shifted the balance, or at least put some sand in the gears, as we like to say, in terms of that legislative session. So she fought that all the way through. But right now, we really are clear that that position would ascend. There could be some things that you could do, which I won't get into now because I think that gets too far in the weeds. But let's just say that our Senator Champion President Champion does ascend to lieutenant governor, then that would create a vacancy for the Senate seat, in which anyone, maybe even someone on this page here, would have the opportunity, or anyone else that lives in the district would have an opportunity to run for. And let's play it out. Let's just say our superstar representative that's on the page now, Representative Abaje, and the great work, and she was awfully modest, Al. She not only passed the African American Preservation Act, she passed the down payment assistance that included people who were formerly foreclosed on, which looked like us, were now eligible for those dollars. The work she's doing on Black women's maternal health is phenomenal. I've worked on some of those things. She brought that stuff over along with Senator Champion. I just need to maybe make sure, because sometimes when we're sitting there, we want to be modest, and I don't have to do that anymore in my role today. But let's just say that happened. She became our newest state senator. Then there would have to be another special election to fulfill her seat. I'm only saying that because it just gives people a path. It doesn't mean that that's the way it's going to go. If that's the opportunity, and the transformation in that is this: we would have the first Native American governor in the state, and we would have the first African American lieutenant governor in the state. That's the transformation. When Senator Champion and I started the legislature in 2008, it was me and him. I think Representative Moran hadn't even been there, hadn't even been elected yet. Representative Mariani, And I feel like maybe Representative Seitel, and I could be missing a person, and there were a couple people in the Senate. That was it. And so now to have an actual posse caucus, 30 people strong, with leadership opportunities, presidencies, governorships, it has gone. And the reason why, and that was in 2009. So people don't think things can change. It can, and it can change rapidly if we're committed to doing so. So that's the transformation I think you're talking about.
Haley had a question. Haley, your comment?
Yeah, I want to echo what we just heard. This really is transformational, like you said, Al. It really is. I think it's important for people to realize you're not just voting for president. There are incredible shifts that are going to come with the results if this goes the way that we want. And when earlier in this conversation, I was talking about how I'm Gen Z, and there's a lot of issues that we're seeing and that we've heard mentioned just now: women's rights, immigration, gun violence, whatever it may be. And I want to shine a light on the fact that a lot of people have a misconception that the election's kind of the finish line, that's the once they vote, it's kind of like they're done, they've done all that they can do, or once our candidates that we voted for get into office, like everything will be set and ready to go. But my question for you three here with us is what, especially as like I said, my generation is Gen Z, those who can't vote or those who this is their first time voting, what can we do after the election to support you in representing us fully, and kind of move the country in the direction we want to move it in?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I mean, I think the best thing to do, and I tell people this, is like voting is one of the things that you do to show your civic engagement, but the other part is getting involved in your community or with organizations. So I think for young people or anyone, find an issue that you care about. It doesn't have to be big. It can even be something as simple as, you want to make sure that there's like enough stop signs in your neighborhood, right? There's probably an organization either already working on that, or you can get your neighbors together to sign a petition, send it to your city council, your public works department, and they can help bring that into fruition. So like whatever it is in your corner of the world that you feel really passionate about, start to bring people together or find organizations that are already doing that. And then the way you lend your voice to that, the way you participate in that, you'll start to see results. And that's really what makes our society and what helps us create a place where we can see equitable policies that benefit Black and Brown folks, that benefit people who are living with disabilities, that benefit women, that all of that can come to fruition because we have people who are involved in making their voices heard outside of the ballot box as well. And then I think for those of us who are in the legislature, if there's a bill or a piece of legislation either that you've helped work on with us or that you're interested in, show up at the Capitol. The more that we have people in those seats who are advocating for those issues, the more it says to myself and our colleagues that, oh, this is important and we need to do something about it. So I think it's kind of the same advice people probably give over the years is like, show up, speak up, and, do something about it. As former First Lady Michelle Obama said, like, go ahead and do something. You don't need to be invited, just start.
Jeff, talk about the money, if you would. When you and I started talking about this 20 years ago, when you and President Champion were just getting into the youth city council first, then legislature, right?
Yes,
then the Senate, Bobby Joe, straight to the legislature following you. The dynamic then was that the state was concerned about what's happening in the Iron Range and with the farmers. And it seemed, from my point of view as an observer reporter, that the concerns of the city broadly, but our part of the city specifically, were kept at the margin. We get around to it when we get around to it. Our stuff is real business. You all are just there. That was kind of the feeling I had from within where I stand as a resident, as a voter, as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, and as a communicator. So I criticized that all the time. You know that. And so then we looked at analyses, for example, of state spending. And while the state talked about diversity, equity, inclusion, the early reports showed that less than $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 was being spent by all of this multi-billion-dollar enterprise called state government with Black people. and with people of color. That has changed. And so you kind of laid the groundwork for that in your pioneering work along with President Champion to insist on and to point out and raise questions as to why things weren't happening. But the class that Esther represents is the class that delivered. And I interviewed her colleagues and Esther with about the clarity of their argument and their capacity to lock it down and push the money out the door. Talk about that whole process. How did it look to you, Jeff?
Yeah, and I think that this idea of making sure that, like, people talk about political capital, right? Like, you got to have your political capital. You got to figure out, what to do with it and how to use it. That's this kind of insidery term in terms of getting, trying to make sure that you're doing the right thing and you're not kind of just all over the place. The problem with political capital and with a lot of legislators and a lot of elected officials is they never spend it. At some point, you have to spend that political capital. So arm in arm and lockstep with Senator Champion and some allies, to be frank with you, Senator Disick, frankly, Senator Bach up on the range at the time, which, a lot of people don't believe, and we coalesced the governor and others. But it started out with us spending our political capital. Al, I'm going to tell another story because, it's kind of where I'm at. And the story I'm going to tell, this is what the stage was. It's about 2014. We were coming out of the recession, right? And the economic, the Survey USA and the people who does the work to figure out where the state's economy is said, hey, we're officially out of the recession. That work I was saying that Representative Abaje did to kind of clarify for folks that went into mortgage foreclosure and the mortgage foreclosure crisis. Well, they said Minnesotans are back and they're making the same wages, at least that or above that they were before the housing crisis that threw us in a recession, with the exception of African Americans, East African people, Somali descent, Asians, but specifically the Hmong community. We disaggregated it, Latinos and the indigenous community. So they called and they said, hey, the Star Tribune or whoever called and wanted to get a quote on the deal. And I started to try to figure out. So I said, well, what did the governor's office say? By then, this Governor Dayton, he's a friend. He's a Democrat. We work closely together. People in his administration are my great friends, and he's a great friend. And they said, well, they're still trying to figure it out. And I said, well, does he care more about walleyes than Black people? Well, let me give you the context to that. We were headed to the special session in order to give money to people in Mille Lacs, the business owners in Mille Lacs that were losing business because the walleye, the fish population, had dissipated and you couldn't fish for it. And that was the main reason why people would go there and spend their money. And up on the Iron Range, there was the steel market had tanked out, and there were unemployment benefits that were about to run out. So we were working a package to come back to the legislature for a special session to take some extra money and make those people whole. So when I said, well, does he care more than walleyes than Black people? That was the announcement that do we care more about everybody else in the state now, as you talked about, than we do us. Well, I can tell you that Governor Dayton wasn't too happy about that because it went up in the Star Tribune as above the fold quote from me. That's what you call spending capital. That turned out to be working with his staff, former Commissioner Shantera, who was his aide at the time, Senator Champion. It was a Republican-led House at the time, so I had to get our leadership involved, and we had to horse trade and negotiate, and we got the first economic package that was directly related to those populations. That I had to spend that capital, and I didn't know impulsively. I didn't think about it, but I didn't know because I could have put a target on my back and say, we're never going to give Hayden another thing again. As a matter of fact, we're going to go after him. We're going to get him out there because he embarrassed the governor. What happened, and to Governor Dayton's credit, he wasn't too happy, but he understood what we were trying to say. We worked collaboratively. We held hearings. We used every lever we could, including you, Al, and the Black media. We took people like Al Flowers and and I don't think he'll mind if I say this, all the disruptors in our community, and we marched them down to the state capitol, and they were looking for their economic stimulus package. They were looking for their money, and ultimately we got a commitment of $35 million, and they were in the tails. And Representative Babaje understands that means that money was ongoing and new money, which then laid down the path of really looking at these issues. So then the next generation of legislators had really a good grounding in kind of what to do, knew that they could do it. And then when they got more folks, and then the state's economic picture was even brighter and the coffers got bigger, then they went and spent their political capital, and then they did unprecedented things that we had done at that time. Once again, that was only in 2014, and they were able to spend unprecedented amount of resources that are directed at our community. That's the kind of progression that I think we would want to see. And it's policy as well. We haven't gotten to that. The African American Preservation Act, Representative Babaje and Senator Champion got over. That started with Randy Stanton and Linda Berglund started the Council of Black Americans, which is the African Heritage Council now. The Council of Black Minnesotans was started because of the disproportionality of Black kids in the system, and that was in 1980, and they got that through this past session. So everybody that comes before us in that continuum has a job to do, and we did our job, and now the next generation of legislators are doing their job. And I just looked up Haley's impressive LinkedIn, and she looks impressive, and I think she's going to do her job as well.
Yeah. So, Senator, State Representative Esther, describe then what you all felt you both inherited and claimed as you took the reins of power. Number one, 30 members of the, is it POCI or BIPOC, People of Color Caucus, versus an environment that too often used to have stories in the paper about the dynamic duo, Jeff and Bobby. That was it, and it had been onesie twosies for generations. I go back to when, what was Bob's name? He was a Black senator from St. Louis, Bob Lewis, and Ray Pleasant, Republican from Bloomington, I believe, but always one or two, never a force. And I think the move then would be to figure out how you can help somebody else who might or might not be able to help you a little bit without, risking their standing in their community. That dynamic is changed. What does a potential block of 30 votes mean for shifting policy in the legislature, both in the House and in the Senate? How do you approach your power, Representative?
Yeah, I think, that's something that we are continuing to learn and to build on. So, we're super grateful to, former Senator Jeff Hayden and Senate President Bobby Joe Champion, former State Representative Rena Moran, now Commissioner Moran, and others who came before us, particularly from all different types of communities. They were the ones who laid the groundwork. They passed a lot of bills that we're building on, and then we're hopeful that we'll pass a lot of bills that the folks coming behind us will also build on. But I do think our current numbers now says a lot. It says a lot about the communities that are sending us to the state capitol, that they want to see action. They want to see us be direct and be bold and be fighting for them. And I think our numbers block, whenever we're able to really coalesce around something, we have been able to talk with leadership to say, look, this is not the direction that we want to go. You're going to need to change some things here in order to secure our vote. So there have been times where we've had to have those hard conversations with leadership. We're not trying to do it superficially and trying to, not be serious about it. But we know that every once in a while there comes to be a time where something that's going up is going to either directly or indirectly harm our communities. And so we're always on the watch for that. We also are on the watch to making sure that the policies that put forward, especially when it comes to the economy and monetary issues, is actually going to provide a benefit back to our communities. Is there an equitable benefit back to communities that have been underinvested in intentionally? And so those are the types of questions we ask. I think people are listening to us more. I think people are interested in the work that we can do and in the direction that we can move Minnesota to be much more inclusive. And so, we're always sort of learning and building in that, because we're not in a 1 and 2 space anymore, like you said, where we kind of have to think about not only our own political career, but also, what's good for the community. Now we have people we can lean on, and we can know that, we'll be able to back each other up. And I think that makes it a really interesting time to govern, because we can actually really move forward with the equitable policies, the harm repair policies that are really necessary in the state.
Coach Leah, you had a comment?
Oh my gosh, so many things. The first thing I want to mention is, when you talk about the stars aligning, Al, I'm just so not surprised that even in the pulpit, you've got pastors everywhere talking about this moment. And my pastor on yesterday, actually, his sermon title was A Kairotic Moment. And if you want to understand what kairotic means, it's basically, it's not the same as chronological. It's when a moment happens and it's something that you didn't necessarily see coming, but it's here now. It's here right now. And I just love how we're seeing that. We are absolutely seeing that this is the time. This is absolutely the time. And then pastors, and even Kamala Harris herself, Vice President Kamala Harris herself, is talking about that in pulpits and churches. And so I just think that that's so super cool. And if we don't take this moment as something that is actually a thing, this is actually a real thing. We are hopeful that the right decision will be made by everybody on tomorrow. But and it's not even a but, and when we have the right decision made, that we all continue to do the work, though, that you're absolutely right. You can't stop with just tomorrow's election. Everybody everywhere has to continue to do the work that we've been charged to do to make the life and livelihoods that we want for ourselves and our generations to come to be an actual reality.
Shamika, you work with His Works United, a coalition of Black church leaders in Twin Cities, and the fire of the moment has been in my view, disgusting presentation by what I call the white Christian nationalist. The person in particular is Donnie Swaggart, who, in a sense, in a very condemning and nasty, ugly way, condemned a Black church leader specifically and Black church in general for not supporting Donald Trump, and blasted the temerity to blast us for recommending and supporting Vice President Kamala Harris. I thought that's the height of indignity. But how is the Black church responding? We're down in the last couple of minutes, but you all have rallied, and what's the feeling like?
We have, people are feeling good about it. Again, with the churches, it's being there to get that information out there. When you go to church, it's a variety of things that they talk about. So, it's highway projects, it's elections, it's all of these different things going on. And a lot of people, that is where they put that trust. And I know we mentioned this last show about those comments. Those were terrible, disgusting comments that, when you get into using the word of God to twist and distort it, it's just a terrible place to be. And so I think as far as the Black church in Minnesota specifically, they feel good about it. I think they realize the importance behind people getting out there. They've came together, in the ways in which they're able to do with their status and such, and said, we're going to offer rides to the polls. We're going to offer information on early voting. We're going to talk about these platform issues and what they are and why they affect us. And so I think that, it's feeling good here. I know it's not that way everywhere, because some states it's a lot more rough than it is here. But here, I think the pastors have done a great job of making sure that their congregations feel informed and have the tools and resources needed to be able to really get out and vote.
We got about 30 seconds each. Haley comments, and then Representative Esther and I'm going to have my brother, my leader, former Senator Jeff Hayden, close us out. Haley, go ahead. Comment, question, however you want to do it. What your thoughts, your feelings?
Yes, thank you. I just kind of wanted to throw out there as maybe kind of like a looking at the present and the future type of question. We're kind of living and also writing the future chapters of history books here. And the classrooms have really become a battleground for a lot of different policies and issues. And so kind of my question or like food for thought for the viewers and also for everyone here on the call is, what impacts does education have on our voters now and future voters, those who are in elementary school? And what can we do to ensure that the books and lessons in our classroom reflect our diversity, our history, and the goals of our nation?
Esther, you respond, please, and then you pass it to Jeff Hayden, and Jeff's going to close us out.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, of course, education is important. We need to know our history to know where we came from so we don't make the same mistakes. That's kind of at a basic level. But also we can learn from the past too. So I do believe it's really important that as people are looking at information as the election plays out with early voting today and then election day tomorrow, just be mindful of the source that you're seeing something from. Just take a pause, make sure you cross-check it with other sources and before you share that information. And then also just making sure that, if for those of people who are watching, who are educators or people who work in our schools, continue to fight to be able to tell the truth in our classrooms so that way people can have the full story and they can, have that critical thinking to be able to consider what they're seeing. And then with that, just thanks so much again, Al. It's always a pleasure to be here and really just, everyone have a good election day and don't forget to vote.
There you go. Jeff, close us out, will you? Unmute, Jeff.
Sorry, I'm sorry about that. I thought I would know that by now. I would just say thank you for everybody that's there, each and every one of the folks that you've had on your panel today and that you continue to do this work, Al, to get information out to our community is important. We all have different titles and there's a hierarchy that kind of gets set, for a reason, but everybody here has a responsibility and has helped us to get to this point. The only thing that I would say, especially in the Black community, is that I'm committed to, I know Shamika is, I know Representative Bajay and others, to doing this in a way that we don't have to always come together in October and in early November to have this conversation. That we should be having this conversation quarterly. We should be having this conversation monthly. We should continue to check in. We should, because not only will that help us, that will dismiss some of the issues there, but I'm telling you, I work every single day as a government relations person, AKA a lobbyist. It had a hard time to say that at the Capitol, but I can tell you that Representative Bajay needs to hear from you and not just your complaints. They need to hear like, go on, girl, we're with you. Or what is it that we can do for you? So our ability to continue to focus and to have these forums to make sure that you understand that the stimulus check that you got during COVID was not a Donald Trump check. It was a check because of Donald Trump. It was like getting hit in the mouth and him giving you a piece of ice to try to soothe you. That the reason why we got into that situation in large part is because he ignored the impending pandemic. We need to be able to have those conversations, because when we try to recreate those conversations and we try to say it 3 and 4 years later, people's memories get a little shaky. So I'll leave us with to say we're going to have a great day tomorrow, but we need to continue to have this dialogue in these forums in a continuous basis, and we won't have to kind of fall back and then have to catch up every single cycle.
Well, tomorrow, the program is our live broadcast on KFAI, so we'll obviously be talking about the election all day tomorrow as well. So thank you for listening. We asked everybody that has tuned in today and who might be connected on Facebook or LinkedIn or on Twitter, share this conversation. This is truly a rich and wonderful conversation. That's what we do. We promise to deliver robust conversations. Today has exactly been that. We'll do it again tomorrow, and we'll be here in the future simply unpacking and writing, actually, a narrative, a future in which we co-author, in which we win. I'm Al McFarlane. Thanks to all of my guests today. Thanks to former Senator Jeff Hayden. Thanks to Coach Leah, the sports editor for Insight News, columnist, attorney Haley Taylor Schlitz. Haley, thank you so much. State Representative Esther Agbaje and community mover, organizer extraordinaire, Shamika Bogan. Thank you all. Thanks to Ilhan Omar. We'll see you next time. Take care.